The USB drive was supposed to burn with everything else: the cabin, the evidence, the family of investigative journalists who had gotten too close to the truth about international child trafficking. Vincent Sterling had planned it perfectly. A tragic accident that would silence the Rodriguez family forever and bury 8 months of dangerous investigation in ash and smoke. But Sterling made one critical mistake. He underestimated Rex, a German shepherd who had been retired from police work for the crime of protecting children from corrupt officers. When the flames engulfed the Rodriguez cabin that December night, Rex didn't just save 6-year-old Emma. He saved the evidence that would bring down an entire criminal empire. For 6 days, through 52 miles of Colorado wilderness, Rex carried more than just a traumatized child on his back. He carried justice. He carried hope. He carried the future of thousands of other children who didn't even know they needed saving. This is the story of how love, loyalty, and one dog's refusal to surrender changed the world forever. The bitter December wind cut through Pine Ridge, Colorado, like a knife through silence, carrying with it the promise of another brutal mountain winter. Inside Station 19, the air hung thick with the aroma of burnt coffee and the weight of a morning that had started like any other. Captain Jake Morrison, a 23-year veteran with silver threading through his dark hair, wrapped his calloused hands around a paper cup that had seen better days. The coffee tasted like motor oil mixed with regret, but it was hot. And in the Colorado Rockies, hot was currency. Lieutenant Sarah Chen sat across from him at the scratched wooden table, her Asian features sharp with concentration, as she reviewed the duty roster. At 35, she'd seen enough fires, enough tragedy, enough of humanity's worst moments to develop the kind of steady calm that only comes from dancing with death and living to tell about it. Beside her, rookie Tommy Martinez fidgeted with his radio, the nervous energy of youth radiating from every movement. 6 months on the job, and the kid still jumped at every alarm bell like it might be his last. "Storm's coming in hard," Sarah murmured, glancing toward the frost-covered windows. "Weather Service is calling for another 8 inches by nightfall." Jake nodded, taking another sip of the wretched coffee. "Roads will be hell. Hope nobody decides to—" The words died in his throat. Through the station's bay doors, something emerged from the snow-laden forest that bordered the station grounds. At first it was just a shadow against the white, a dark smudge moving with the deliberate slowness. Wasn't just any dog. Blood matted his once magnificent coat, turning the rich browns and blacks into a canvas of pain. Soot covered his fur like a second skin, and with each labored step, he left crimson prints in the pristine snow. His powerful frame, built for pursuit and protection, now moved with the careful deliberation of something broken, but not beaten. But it wasn't the dog that stopped 3 experienced firefighters cold. On his back, secured somehow in what looked like a charred police dog vest, was a child. A little girl, no more than 6 years old, hung limp as a rag doll across the German shepherd's broad shoulders. Her small arms dangled lifeless, and even from a distance they could see the angry wound at her temple, the way her left ankle hung at an unnatural angle. Her clothes were black with soot, her dark hair matted with blood and ash. The dog's amber eyes, dulled with pain but still burning with purpose, locked onto Jake's. In that gaze, the captain saw something that would haunt him for the rest of his days. A plea, a question, a desperate hope that said more clearly than words, "I carried her this far. Please don't let it be for nothing." Tommy's radio clattered to the floor. Sarah's duty roster fluttered from her hands like a wounded bird. Jake felt his knees wobble, his mind struggling to process what his eyes were seeing. The German Shepherd took 3 more steps, each one a monumental effort that spoke of miles traveled and obstacles overcome. When he reached the concrete pad in front of the station, he stopped. His massive head turned, amber eyes finding the child on his back one last time. Then, with infinite care, he lowered himself to the ground. What happened next would play in slow motion in Jake's memory for decades to come. The dog's powerful jaws, designed to subdue criminals and detect explosives, became instruments of tenderness. He gently, oh so gently, took hold of the child's jacket and lifted her from his back, placing her on the cold concrete as carefully as a mother, laying down a sleeping infant. His movement spoke of love deeper than instinct, of a bond forged in fire and sealed with blood. The moment the child was safe, the German Shepherd's strength finally abandoned him. His legs buckled and he collapsed beside her, his massive frame hitting the concrete with a sound that echoed through the station like a gunshot. But even as unconsciousness claimed him, his body curved protectively around the little girl, one last act of guardianship from a warrior who had given everything. For a heartbeat that lasted an eternity, the 3 firefighters stood frozen in disbelief. The morning had been ordinary, predictable, safe. Was first to move, her EMT certification kicking in as she dropped to her knees beside the unconscious child. Her experienced hands moved with practiced efficiency, checking for a pulse, assessing breathing, looking for signs of life in a small, still form. "Jake, call for 2 buses," she shouted, her voice cutting through the morning air like a blade. "Tell them we need pediatric trauma and large animal emergency." Jake's fumbling fingers found his radio. "Dispatch, Station 19. We need immediate medical response, 2 units. 1 pediatric trauma, 1... hell, I don't know what to call it. Large animal emergency, I guess." "Copy, Station 19. Nature of emergency?" Jake looked at the scene before him. The bleeding dog, the unconscious child, the impossible tableau that had materialized from the forest like something from a fever dream. "Dispatch, you're not going to believe this." Sarah's hands moved over the child with gentle precision. The little girl's pulse was weak but steady, her breathing shallow but present. Hypothermia, definitely. Dehydration, likely. The head wound looked superficial, but would need attention. The ankle was another story, swollen to twice its normal size and hot to the touch, despite the cold. "She's alive," Sarah called out, and the relief in her voice was palpable. "Vitals are weak but stable. Tommy, get me the pediatric kit from bus 2, and grab those warming blankets." As Tommy raced toward the ambulance, Sarah began a more thorough examination. The child's clothes told a story of their own. Expensive hiking boots, sized for a child, quality winter gear that had been put through hell. But it was what she found in the little girl's coat pocket that made Sarah's breath catch. First, a photograph, burned around the edges, water-damaged, but still recognizable. A family portrait showing a man and woman with kind eyes flanking the unconscious child. The little girl was laughing in the photo, her arms wrapped around the neck of a magnificent German Shepherd that looked remarkably like the one now lying unconscious beside her. Second, something that seemed almost too fragile to have survived whatever ordeal these 2 had endured. A small, silver whistle on a chain, child-sized, obviously precious to its owner. Sarah held the whistle up to the light, studying it. On impulse, She brought it to her lips and blew a soft, weak note. The effect was instantaneous and heartbreaking. The German shepherd's eyes fluttered open, amber depths focusing on the sound with desperate hope. His massive head lifted from the concrete, searching, and when his gaze found Sarah, holding the whistle, something like recognition flickered in his expression. His tail, matted with blood and debris, attempted a weak wag, one small movement that spoke volumes about love, loyalty, the concrete with a soft thud. His breathing becoming labored and shallow, Sarah whispered, clutching the whistle to her chest. Whatever story this was, whatever had brought a child and her protector through hell and snow to their doorstep, it was far from over. The sound of approaching sirens filled the air as Pine Ridge General's ambulance screamed toward them, followed closely by the larger vehicle from Mountain View Veterinary Emergency. As the EMTs poured out of their vehicles, Sarah found herself looking back and forth between the unconscious child and the dying dog, understanding with crystal clarity that she was witnessing something extraordinary. 2 lives hung in the balance, 2 ambulances, 2 different hospitals, but one story, woven together with threads of love, sacrifice, and a loyalty so pure it defied explanation. As the child was carefully loaded onto a stretcher, her small hand trailing toward the dog, even in unconsciousness, Fire Chief Robert Hayes arrived on scene. A man who'd seen everything the Colorado mountains could throw at emergency responders. Hayes took one look at the scene and shook his head in wonder. "Where did they come from?" he demanded, his gruff voice betraying his amazement. "How far did they walk? In these conditions, with those injuries?" He trailed off, studying the blood trail that led back into the forest, the paw prints and small boot impressions already being covered by falling snow. Sarah looked up from where she knelt beside the German shepherd as the veterinary team prepared to transport him. "Chief," she said quietly, "I don't think they walked." "What do you mean?" She pointed to the dog's massive paws, shredded and bloody, then to the child's boots, worn through at the toes. "I think they ran from something bad enough to make a wounded dog carry a hurt child through a Colorado winter. The question isn't how far they came. Then what is the question?" Sarah's eyes met his, and in them, Chief Hayes saw something that chilled him more than the December wind. The question is what they were running from that was worse than dying in the snow. As the ambulances disappeared into the swirling storm, their red and blue lights painting the snow in patriotic colors, Station 19 fell into an unnatural quiet. The coffee cup Jake had dropped still lay in shards on the concrete, the dark liquid frozen into abstract patterns that looked almost like tears. Tommy stood at the bay doors, watching the forest where the mysterious pair had emerged. "Cap," he said softly, "you ever see anything like that?" Jake shook his head, but it was Sarah who answered. "No," she said, "and I hope I never have to again. Because whatever put them through hell enough to make that journey, it's still out there." The investigation began within hours. Emma Rodriguez. No wallet, no phone, no backpack, just the clothes on her back, each piece telling its own story of survival against impossible odds. The German shepherd was a different matter. The veterinary team at Mountain View had found what they were looking for almost immediately: a microchip embedded beneath his scarred hide. The scanner revealed a registration number that led to Summit County Sheriff's Office K9 Division. Rex. Retired German Shepherd, 8 years of distinguished service. Last known address, a ranch 47 miles away in the heart of the Rocky Mountains. Last known handler, Officer Maria Santos. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, Pine Ridge's chief veterinarian, stood over Rex's unconscious form and shook her head. 47 miles, she murmured to her assistant, through mountain terrain, in winter conditions, carrying a child. She lifted one of Rex's massive paws, studying the damage. These pads are shredded down to raw meat. He's got glass embedded in his back and flanks. Severe dehydration, hypothermia, and blood loss that should have killed him 10 miles ago. But he made it, her assistant observed. Dr. Walsh nodded, her eyes growing soft as she looked at the warrior lying on her examination table. Yeah, he made it. Question is, what gave him the strength to keep going when his body had already given up? The answer, she suspected, was lying in a hospital bed 3 miles away. A 6-year-old girl who had somehow survived an ordeal that would have broken grown men. By evening, the story had begun to spread. Local news crews arrived at both hospitals, drawn by reports of a miraculous rescue involving a child and her canine guardian. The footage was limited. Hospital privacy laws protected Emma, and Rex was in no condition for cameras. But the basic facts were enough to capture imaginations. A retired police dog, a 6-year-old girl, 47 miles of winter wilderness, a journey that defied explanation, undertaken by a pair that should never have survived. The math didn't make sense. Completely impossible, the experts said. But sometimes, the impossible happens anyway. Sometimes, love finds a way to write its own equations, to solve problems that logic says have no solution. And sometimes, heroes come on 4 legs, carrying the future on their backs through hell itself, refusing to quit until they've delivered hope safely into the hands of those who still believe in miracles. The mystery of Rex and Emma Rodriguez was just beginning to unfold, but one thing was already clear to everyone who'd witnessed their arrival. They'd seen something extraordinary, something that would change Pine Ridge forever. The storm continued to rage outside, but inside Station 19, 3 firefighters sat in contemplative silence, each knowing they'd been patrol cruiser into the parking lot of Mountain View Veterinary Emergency, just as the afternoon sun began its descent behind the Colorado peaks. At 42, she carried herself with the quiet authority of someone who'd spent 15 years walking the thin blue line, her dark hair pulled back in a regulation bun that couldn't quite hide the premature gray threading through it. In her hands, she clutched a manila folder thick with 8 years of memories, commendations, and one devastating black mark that had ended everything. Dr. Walsh met her at the entrance, her scrubs still stained with Rex's blood, from the emergency surgery that had lasted 6 hours. "Officer Santos, I'm Jennifer Walsh. Thank you for coming so quickly." Maria's throat tightened as she followed the veterinarian through sterile hallways that smelled of antiseptic and hope. "How is he?" "Alive," Dr. Walsh replied simply. "Barely, but alive. The injuries he sustained, I've never seen anything like it. It's as if he burned through every reserve of strength his body possessed, and then found more somewhere else." They stopped outside a recovery room, where Rex lay motionless on a heated blanket. IV lines snaking from his powerful forearms, monitors beeping softly in the background. The magnificent German shepherd who had once commanded respect from criminals and colleagues alike looked small beneath the medical equipment, his breathing shallow but steady. Maria's vision blurred as she opened the folder. 8 years, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. 8 years of perfect service, narcotics detection, missing persons, crowd control. Rex was everything a canine officer should be, smart, loyal, fearless. She pulled out a photograph, Rex in his prime, alert and proud beside Maria in her dress uniform. "He saved my life twice, once during a drug bust gone wrong, another time when a suspect tried to ambush me during a traffic stop." Dr. Walsh studied the commendations spread across Rex's medical chart. "These are incredible. What happened? Why was he retired?" The question hung in the air like a physical weight. Maria's jaw tightened, and when she spoke, her words carried the bitter taste of injustice. Official record says he attacked a fellow officer without provocation during a domestic disturbance call, labeled him unstable, dangerous, unsuitable for continued service. But that's not what really happened. Maria shook her head, her eyes never leaving Rex's still form. We were responding to a child welfare check. Vincent Sterling, he was a senior deputy then, had connections all the way up to the sheriff. He was supposed to be securing the scene while I interviewed the mother. I heard screaming from the back room. She paused, her hands trembling slightly as she remembered. When I got there, Sterling had a 7-year-old boy cornered in a closet. The kid was terrified, crying, and Sterling was—
Authority, Maria's voice dropped to a whisper. Rex saw it before I did. He went for Sterling's throat, would have killed him. I had gone him off. Dr. Walsh felt a chill that had nothing to do with the hospital's air conditioning. What happened to the boy? Nothing, Maria said, the word bitter as poison. Sterling claimed the child was resisting, that he was simply restraining him. The mother was too frightened to speak up. Sterling had been threatening her for months. It became my word and Rex's instincts against the decorated officer with 20 years of service and friends in high places. And they chose to believe Sterling. They chose to protect the department's reputation. Rex was quietly retired. Labeled as having developed inappropriate aggression, I was transferred to a desk job until I quit 6 months later. Maria finally looked up from Rex, her eyes blazing with old fury. But I knew the truth. That dog doesn't attack without reason. He sensed something we missed, something evil that wore a badge and used it to hurt children. Dr. Walsh processed this information, pieces clicking into place. The Rodriguez family. They were the ones who took Rex? Maria nodded, pulling out another set of papers. Miguel Rodriguez reached out to me after hearing about Rex through mutual contacts. He and his wife, Sophia, were looking for a protection dog for their daughter, Emma. She'd been struggling with anxiety, night terrors. They thought Rex might help. And did he? For the first time since arriving, Maria smiled. Emma fell in love with him instantly, called him her guardian angel. She'd spent hours drawing pictures of Rex with wings, telling anyone who'd listen that he'd been sent from heaven to watch over her family. The smile faded. I visited them a few times over the past year. Rex was happy. Really happy, maybe for the first time since his retirement. He'd found his purpose again. Dr. Walsh looked through the window at Rex's bandaged form. And now he's here, having carried that little girl through hell itself. Which tells me that whatever happened to them, whatever they were running from, it was bad enough to wake up every protective instinct Rex ever had. Maria's voice hardened. And I'd bet my pension that Vincent Sterling is somehow involved. The Rodriguez family had built their lives on truth. Uncomfortable, dangerous, necessary truth that most people preferred to leave buried. Miguel Rodriguez, 38 years old, with gentle eyes and calloused hands that spoke of a working-class childhood, had found his calling in the shadows between law enforcement and journalism. His wife, Sophia, 2 years younger and possessing the kind of fierce intelligence that could unravel lies like a master weaver undoing a tapestry, complemented his methodical approach with intuitive leaps that often broke cases wide open. Together, they specialized in the stories that made people look away. Human trafficking. Networks that moved like cancer through the Southwest. Corruption that wore three-piece suits and charity galas as camouflage. And the systematic exploitation of the most vulnerable members of society. Their latest investigation had consumed them for 8 months. A pattern of missing children, primarily from immigrant families, all with connections to construction projects throughout Colorado, New Mexico, and Arizona. The official reports claimed runaways, family disputes, children returning to relatives in other countries. But Miguel and Sophia had found threads connecting each disappearance to a web of shell companies, offshore accounts, and a construction empire built on human misery. At the center of it all sat Vincent Sterling, now a respected businessman who'd parlayed his law enforcement connections
into a real estate fortune. On paper, he was everything a community could want: job creator, philanthropist, pillar of society. His construction company had built schools, hospitals, community centers. His charitable foundation provided scholarships for underprivileged children. The reality, buried beneath layers of legal paperwork and intimidation, was far darker. Emma Rodriguez lived in the middle of this dangerous world with the blissful ignorance of childhood. But even she sensed the tension that had crept into her parents' lives over the past year. Death threats had started arriving in their mailbox, nothing dramatic, just simple statements about the fragility of family and the importance of minding one's own business. The phone calls came at all hours, silent breathing on the other end of the line, or sometimes just children crying. That's when Rex had truly found his purpose. The bond between the 6-year-old girl and the retired police dog transcended species, age, and circumstance. Emma would curl up against Rex's massive form while doing homework, her small fingers tracing the scars on his hide as she chattered about her day. She drew him constantly. Rex with golden wings, Rex wearing a superhero cape, Rex standing guard over their house with stars shining in his fur. Her favorite drawing, the one she'd carried with her in that charred pocket, showed Rex and Emma walking hand in paw across a rainbow bridge, both of them smiling. The whistle had been Emma's 6th birthday present from Rex, or rather from Miguel and Sofia, who'd presented it as being from Rex during a backyard party that felt like the last normal day their family would ever have. It was silver-plated, child-sized, with a clear, sweet tone that carried far in the mountain air. Emma had immediately declared it the most beautiful sound in the world and had worn it every day since. "If you ever get scared or lost," Sophia had told her daughter, "blow the whistle. Rex will find you, no matter how far away he is." It was a promise made in love and sealed with the innocent. Stake her life on those words. The cabin in the Rocky Mountains had been their last resort, 47 miles from civilization, off-grid, with no digital footprint and no paper trail leading back to them. Miguel had purchased it through a series of shell companies that would have made Vincent Sterling proud, paying cash and registering it under a name that existed only in their investigation files. For 3 weeks, they'd lived like pioneers, using generator power and satellite internet to compile their final report. The evidence was overwhelming. Financial records, witness testimonies, photographs of Sterling at locations where children had later disappeared. They had enough to bring down not just Sterling, but an entire network of co-conspirators spanning 3 states and 2 countries. They'd been so close to completing their investigation, so close to finally exposing the monster who wore a badge and used it to destroy innocence. They'd had no idea that their digital breadcrumbs, careful as they'd been, had eventually led predators to their door. The last entry in Sophia's journal, found later in the cabin's ashes, had been dated the morning of the fire. "Tomorrow we go home. Tomorrow we change everything. Rex will protect us until then." The irony would haunt investigators for years, that Rex had indeed protected them, but not in the way Sophia had imagined. Vincent Sterling stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse office, watching the sun set over Denver's skyline, while his assistant briefed him on the day's developments. At 54, he was still handsome, in the way that money and power made men handsome, silver hair perfectly styled, Italian suit tailored to hide the softness around his middle, Swiss watch catching the light as he gestured with manicured hands. "The Rodriguez situation has been contained," his assistant, a sharp-faced woman named Carol Hendricks, reported without looking up from her tablet. Local media is treating it as a tragic accident. 3 presumed dead, no survivors. Sterling nodded, but something in his expression remained troubled. And the investigation, their files? Destroyed in the fire. The cabin was completely consumed, nothing salvageable. Sterling should have felt relief. For 8 months, Miguel and Sofia Rodriguez had been like persistent mosquitoes, buzzing around the edges of his carefully constructed empire, gathering evidence that could have unraveled decades of work. Their investigation had come dangerously close to exposing not just his activities, but those of powerful men in 3 countries who valued their privacy above all else. But instead of relief, Sterling felt the familiar itch of unfinished business. "What about the child?" he asked quietly. Carol consulted her tablet. "Emma Rodriguez, age 6, body not recovered completely." Sterling turned from the window, his pale eyes reflecting a coldness that had nothing to do with the December weather. "Assumption isn't certainty, Carol. And in this business, loose ends have a way of becoming nooses. Sir, she's 6 years old. Even if she somehow survived the fire, which is impossible, she'd have no way to—" "That family had a dog," Sterling interrupted. "German Shepherd. Used to be a police dog, until it attacked me during a domestic call." His hand unconsciously rubbed his wrist, where faint scars from Rex's teeth still marked his skin. "If the dog survived—" Carol looked up from her tablet, understanding dawning in her eyes. "You think it might have gotten the child out?" Sterling didn't answer directly. Legitimate businesses into offshore accounts. Testimonies from scared witnesses painted pictures of children disappearing into a network that stretched from Denver to Mexico City. Video evidence, grainy but damning, showed Sterling at locations where children had later vanished. "We're really going to do this," she murmured, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. "We're really going to bring him down." Miguel glanced over from the stove, noting the mixture of determination and exhaustion in his wife's dark eyes. "Tomorrow we drive back to Denver. By next week, Sterling and his entire network will be front-page news across 3 states. Emma looked up from her drawing, a smile brightening her face. "Does that mean we can go home? I miss my room and my friends at school." "Yes, corazón," Sofia said, setting aside her laptop to study her daughter's artwork. "Tomorrow, we start going home." The drawing showed Rex, with magnificent golden wings spread wide, standing guard over a small house, while Emma slept safely inside. The detail was remarkable for a 6-year-old, every feather carefully shaded. Rex's expression both fierce and loving, protective fire burning in his amber eyes. "He's your guardian angel," Emma explained seriously, holding up the picture for Rex to see. "Mrs. Santos told me that guardian angels watch over people they love, and Rex loves us more than anything, so he must be an angel." Rex's tail thumped softly against the floor, but his amber eyes held a restlessness that spoke of instincts older than domestication. He'd been pacing all afternoon, pausing frequently at windows and doors, his powerful frame tense with an alertness that even Emma had begun to notice. "Rex seems worried," she observed, scratching behind his scarred ears. "Are you okay, boy?" The German Shepherd whined softly, a sound that made Miguel pause in his cooking. Rex wasn't a dog given to nervousness without cause. During his police career, his intuition had been legendary, sensing danger before humans could identify its source, detecting lies in body language and scent that no technology could match. As the family sat down to dinner, Sofia pulled out a small USB drive and held it up like a trophy. "Everything," she said quietly. "Names, locations, financial records, video testimonies, 8 months of work compressed into 16 gigabytes. that will destroy Vincent Sterling and save dozens of children. Miguel raised his water glass in a mock toast. To justice delayed but not denied. To going home, Emma added, clinking her plastic cup against her parents' glasses. Outside, the December wind howled through the pines, but inside the cabin, warmth and love created a bubble of safety that felt indestructible. As Sophia tucked the USB drive back into her jacket pocket, she smiled at her daughter's bright face.
Gods watched over families who fought for justice in a world that often punished them for it. None of them could have imagined that, within hours, those words would become a prophecy written in fire and blood. Rex continued pacing long after Emma had been tucked into bed, his claws clicking against the wooden floor in rhythm with his increasing agitation. Something was coming. Something that made every instinct scream danger into the winter night. The knock came at 11:47 p.m., 3 sharp raps that shattered the cabin's peaceful silence like gunshots. Miguel jolted awake on the couch, where he'd fallen asleep reviewing case files, while Sophia's eyes snapped open in the bedroom, where she'd been organizing tomorrow's travel plans. "Miguel!" The voice through the door was calm, conversational, tinged with the kind of authority that came from years of wearing a badge. "It's me. Just want to talk." Miguel's blood turned to ice water in his veins. He knew that voice, had heard it in courtrooms and police stations, smooth and reasonable, right up until the moment it turned deadly. Vincent Sterling stood on their doorstep, 47 miles from civilization, in the middle of a Colorado winter. They'd been found. Sophia appeared in the hallway, her face pale but determined. Without a word, she grabbed the USB drive from her jacket and rushed toward Emma's room. Miguel watched her go, understanding flooding through him like poison. If Sterling was here, they were out of time. The investigation, the evidence, their lives, everything hung in the balance of the next few minutes. "Miguel," Sterling called again, his tone patient but carrying an undertone of threat. "I know you're awake. We need to discuss your research project. I think we can reach an understanding." "Papa?" Emma's sleepy voice drifted from her bedroom. "Who's at the door?" Sophia burst into Emma's room, where Rex stood rigid beside the bed, every muscle coiled for action. The dog's amber eyes reflected understanding. This was the moment he'd been sensing all evening, the danger that had kept him pacing. "Mija, listen to me very carefully," Sophia whispered urgently, shoving the USB drive deep into Emma's coat pocket. "If anything happens to us, you run. Do you understand? You take Rex, and you run into the forest, and you don't stop until you find help." Emma sat up, fear beginning to replace sleep in her dark eyes. "Mama, what's wrong? Who's outside?" "Promise me." Sophia gripped her daughter's shoulders, her voice cracking with desperation. "Promise me you'll trust only Rex. Only Rex. He'll keep you safe no matter what happens." Before Emma could respond, the night exploded into violence. The front window shattered inward as Sterling's men breached the cabin from 3 directions simultaneously. Miguel's shout of warning was cut short as accelerant splashed across the living room, the chemical stench filling the air with the promise of fire. Emergency flares followed the liquid, igniting everything they touched in roaring orange fury. In Emma's room, Rex didn't hesitate. 8 years of police training merged with primal protective instinct as he launched himself at the bedroom window with the full force of his 90-pound frame. Glass exploded outward in a shower of crystal rain, each shard finding its mark in Rex's hide as he crashed through the barrier between safety and the winter night. Emma screamed as Rex's blood painted the window frame red, but the German shepherd was already turning back, his powerful jaws finding her jacket and dragging her toward the escape route he'd carved with his own body. "Rex! No! Mama! Papa!" Emma's terrified cries echoed through the chaos as flames began consuming the cabin with supernatural speed. The accelerant had been placed strategically. Within seconds, the entire structure was becoming a crematorium. Rex positioned himself between Emma and the view back into the cabin, his massive form blocking her from seeing the shadows that moved with deadly purpose through the smoke and flame.
His amber eyes held an understanding too terrible for a child to witness. He knew what had happened to Miguel and Sofia Rodriguez, knew why Emma's parents would never answer her calls again. With infinite gentleness, despite the urgency, Rex lifted Emma onto his back, her small arms wrapping instinctively around his thick neck. She was barely conscious, shock and smoke inhalation stealing her awareness as her world dissolved into nightmare. Behind them, the cabin became a funeral pyre against the star-filled Colorado sky, erasing 8 months of investigation and 2 lives dedicated to justice. But clutched in a 6-year-old's coat pocket, 16 gigabytes of evidence survived, carried into the wilderness on the back of a dog who had already given everything and was prepared to give more. Rex's last look back showed him Sterling's silhouette against the flames, the man who had destroyed his first career, now destroying the family who had given him a second chance at purpose. The German shepherd's growl was lost in the roar of burning wood and the howl of winter wind, but the promise in that sound was clear. This wasn't over. The first steps into the wilderness were the hardest Rex had ever taken. Each footfall sent glass fragments deeper into his wounds, and Emma's weight, light as she was, pressed against injuries that screamed for rest and medical attention. But rest meant death, and death meant Sterling's victory. Emma drifted in and out of consciousness as Rex navigated by starlight through terrain that would challenge experienced hikers in daylight. The December cold bit through their clothing and fur like living things with teeth, but Rex pressed on, his internal compass pointing toward Pine Ridge and safety, 47 miles away. "Where are Mama and Papa?" Emma mumbled against Rex's neck, her voice small and lost in the vastness of the Rocky Mountain night. "Why aren't they coming with us?" Rex's only answer was a soft whine that spoke of grief too deep for words. He couldn't tell her that her parents were gone. Couldn't explain that the men who'd come calling had taken everything except the lives they now carried into the darkness. All he could do was walk, one bloody paw in front of the other, carrying hope on his back through a landscape that seemed designed to kill them both. They found shelter in an abandoned mining cave as dawn painted the eastern peaks in shades of rose and gold. Emma was shivering uncontrollably despite Rex's body heat. Her lips blue with cold, the head wound from their escape bleeding steadily. Rex curled his massive frame around her small body, sharing what warmth he had left, breathing warm air across her face to keep the hypothermia at bay. "We'll wait for them here, right, Rex?" Emma whispered, her faith in her parents' survival heartbreaking in its innocence. "They'll find us here, and we'll all go home together." Rex's amber eyes filled with something that looked remarkably like tears as he licked Emma's face, tasting salt and fear and the metallic tang of blood. He wanted to stay in this cave, wanted to let Emma believe her parents might still come for them. But survival demanded movement, demanded that they continue toward civilization before the wounds and weather claimed them both. When morning came, and Emma called for her parents with increasing desperation, Rex made the hardest decision of his life. Gently but firmly, he nudged her onto his back again, ignoring her protests and tears, and carried her deeper into the wilderness. The first day became the first of 6, each one a test of endurance that pushed both dog and child beyond the limits of what should have been possible. Rex's police training had included wilderness survival, but that knowledge seemed inadequate against the reality of carrying a traumatized child through winter mountains with injuries that should have killed him. But love, Rex discovered, was stronger than training. Love could make shredded paws keep walking when bones showed through the wounds. Love could keep a heart beating when blood loss demanded surrender. Love could carry a 6-year-old girl through hell itself, if that's what it took to keep her safe. Emma's weight on his back became both burden and blessing, a constant reminder of why surrender wasn't an option. Her small arms around his neck,
her voice whispering encouragement when she thought he might give up, her absolute faith that Rex would somehow save them both. These became the fuel that kept him moving when his body had nothing left to give. Behind them, Sterling's men would search the ruins of the cabin, would find no small bones among the ashes, would eventually report to their boss that the Rodriguez child had somehow escaped the fire. Sterling would know then that Rex had saved her, would understand that 16 gigabytes of evidence had walked Ernest. But by then, Rex and Emma Rodriguez were already ghosts in the wilderness, leaving only blood drops and paw prints to mark their passage through a landscape that seemed determined to erase them entirely. 45 miles to go, 45 miles between death and hope, carried by a dog who refused to let evil win, protecting a child who still believed in happy endings. The journey that would make them both legends had only just begun. By the third day, Death had become a traveling companion, walking alongside Rex and Emma through the endless white expanse of the Rocky Mountain wilderness. Emma's small body burned with fever that had nothing to do with the December cold. Her temple wound, now angry and infected, weeping fluid that froze against her skin before Rex could clean it away. She spoke constantly now, carrying on animated conversations with people who existed only in her delirium. "Mama, look, Rex has wings!" Emma giggled, her voice cracked and thin as paper. "He's flying us home, just like in my drawing." Rex felt each word like a knife to his heart. The child on his back weighed no more than a sack of grain, but the responsibility of keeping her alive had become heavier than mountains. His own wounds screamed with every step. The glass embedded in his back and flanks had worked deeper, creating a constellation of pain that radiated through his massive frame. His paws, once proud and strong, were now raw meat wrapped around bone, leaving crimson prints in the snow that looked like abstract flowers blooming in the white. "Papa, why is Rex crying?" Emma asked, her small hand patting the side of Rex's neck where tears had frozen into icy tracks through his fur. "Dogs don't cry, do they, Papa?" But dogs did cry, Rex had learned. They cried when the children they were meant to protect burned with fever. They cried when their own bodies betrayed them with weakness at the moment strength was most needed. They cried when love wasn't enough to fix what was broken. The cave appeared like a gift from whatever gods watched over desperate creatures, a natural shelter carved into a granite cliff face, deep enough to provide protection from the wind that cut through the mountains like a living blade. Rex had walked 23 miles in 3 days, an impossible distance given their condition, but he could feel his strength ebbing like water from a cracked vessel. If they didn't rest, if Emma's fever didn't break, they would both die in the snow, their story ending as a mystery for some future hiker to discover. Rex deposited Emma on the cave's sandy floor with infinite care. His powerful jaws that had once subdued armed criminals, now gentle as butterflies. Emma's fever spiked as darkness fell, her small body shaking with chills that no amount of Rex's body heat seemed able to warm. He curled around her like a living blanket, breathing warm air across her face, willing his own life force into her fragile form. "Rex," Emma whispered, sometime after midnight, her voice so quiet he had to strain to hear it.
"I don't want to die like Mama and Papa."
The words hit Rex like physical blows. In her delirium, Emma's child mind had finally begun to process what her heart had refused to accept, that her parents weren't coming, that the flames that night had taken more than their home and belongings.
Rex licked the tears from Emma's face, tasting salt and fear and the metallic tang of infection. His response was a gentle whimper that somehow conveyed everything he couldn't say in words. "I won't let you die. I won't let you join them. I will carry you to safety or die trying." Then, despite every instinct screaming for rest, despite wounds that had begun to fester and muscles that cramped with exhaustion, Rex forced himself to stand. If they stayed in this cave, Emma would die. The infection was winning, the fever consuming her from within. They needed medical attention, needed warm beds and antibiotics, and all the miracles that modern medicine could provide. Emma watched through glassy eyes as Rex struggled to his feet, his powerful frame trembling with effort. Something in his determination, his refusal to surrender, even when surrender would have been merciful, kindled an answering spark in her 6-year-old heart.
Okay, Rex.
She whispered, her small arms reaching up to wrap around his neck.
If you're not giving up, then neither am I.
The fourth day brought a revelation that nearly shattered what remained of Emma's innocence. As Rex carried her through a valley she recognized from their hike in, Emma suddenly understood that they weren't taking a different route home. They were running away from home, and they had been running for days.
Rex, stop.
Emma's voice cracked with panic.
We're going the wrong way. We have to go back. We have to wait for Mama and Papa.
She began to struggle on Rex's back, her small fists pounding against his shoulders, her legs kicking as she tried to slide down to the ground. Rex stopped, his amber eyes reflecting a pain that had nothing to do with his physical wounds.
We have to go back,
Emma sobbed, sliding off Rex's back and turning toward the direction they'd come from.
They don't know where we are. They'll be looking for us.
Rex positioned himself between Emma and the path backward, his massive frame an immovable barrier. When Emma tried to push past him, he gently but firmly took the sleeve of her coat in his mouth, holding her in place without applying pressure that each blow carrying the weight of grief too large for a 6-year-old heart to contain.
I hate you! I hate you! You were supposed to protect them!
Rex's answering howl came from a place deeper than his throat, deeper than his chest, deeper than his bones. It was the sound of a soul in agony, a creature that had failed in the most important mission of his life. The howl echoed through the mountains, a lament for Miguel and Sofia Rodriguez, for a family destroyed by evil, for innocence lost in fire and blood. When the sound faded, Emma saw something that stopped her anger cold. Tears streaming down Rex's muzzle, freezing against his fur. She had never seen a dog cry before, hadn't known they could. But Rex wept openly, his powerful frame shaking with grief that matched her own. "You're sad too," Emma whispered, understanding flooding through her like sunrise. "You miss them too." They held each other then, in the Colorado snow, girl and dog, sharing a pain that had no words, no cure, no easy comfort. Emma's small arms wrapped around Rex's massive neck, while his head rested against her shoulder, both of them crying for the family they'd lost, and the impossible journey that lay ahead. When their tears were spent, Rex gently nudged Emma's coat pocket, where the silver whistle rested against the USB drive. Emma's fingers found the familiar shape, and when she pulled it out, sunlight caught the metal and threw rainbow patterns across the snow. "From my birthday," Emma said quietly. "You gave this to me, so you could always find me." Rex's tail gave the faintest wag, and Emma understood. The whistle wasn't just a gift. It was a promise, a connection that transcended species and circumstance. As long as she had the whistle, she had Rex. And as long as she had Rex, she had hope. "Okay," Emma said, her voice still thick with tears, but steadied by new resolve. "Okay, Rex, I trust you. Take me home." They became legends before anyone knew they existed, leaving traces of their passage that would be discovered only after their story had already captured the world's attention. At dawn on the 5th day, long-haul trucker Billy Morrison was nursing his 3rd cup of coffee and fighting highway hypnosis when his headlights caught something impossible crossing I-70. A massive German shepherd, moving with the careful gait of exhaustion, carried what looked like a small bundle across 4 lanes of asphalt. Billy hit his brakes, the 18-wheeler's air night. It would only gain significance later when investigators began piecing together the route that Rex and Emma had taken through the wilderness. 12 hours later, the security camera at Murphy's Gas and Go captured 90 seconds of footage that would eventually be analyzed, frame by frame, by law enforcement agencies across 3 states. The timestamp read 6:23 a.m., when a large shadow moved behind the dumpsters near the rear of the building. The camera's motion sensors activated, recording a German shepherd drinking from a puddle of melted snow, a small figure visible on his back. The dog's movements were labored but determined. He drank for exactly 37 seconds, lifted his massive head to scan for threats, then disappeared back into the wilderness. The figure on his back never moved during the entire sequence. Gas station owner Murphy O'Brien wouldn't discover the footage until 3 days later, when the Rex and Emma story had already broken nationally. "Jesus," he'd whisper, watching the recording for the dozenth time. "They were right here, and I never knew." At the Pine Ridge bus stop, maintenance worker Harold Schmidt found evidence that would puzzle him for weeks. Dog hairs caught in the bench, small footprints in the mud, and a strange sense that something important had happened in that little shelter. Harold was 67, a Vietnam veteran who'd learned to trust his instincts, and those instincts told him a story had played out in his bus stop, a story of desperation and determination. Something was here, he told his wife over dinner that night, something that needed help. Forest Service Ranger Jennifer Wu was more systematic in her documentation. While conducting a routine patrol of the wilderness area east of Pine Ridge, she discovered tracks that didn't belong to any local wildlife. Large canine prints, too big for a coyote, moving in an unnaturally straight line toward town. Accompanying the dog prints were smaller impressions, human-sized but child-sized and only visible occasionally, as if the person making them wasn't walking but being carried. "Unusual track pattern in Sector 7, Wu reported to her supervisor. "Large canine, possibly German shepherd, traveling with human juvenile. Tracks suggest the canine is carrying the human. Recommend follow-up investigation." The report joined Billy Morrison's CB call and Murphy O'Brien's security footage in a growing file of inexplicable sightings. Each witness glimpsed only a fragment of the larger story, but together they formed a trail of breadcrumbs leading toward Pine Ridge and the miraculous arrival that would soon make headlines around the world. Rex felt none of their amazement, their puzzlement, their wonder. He felt only the weight of Emma on his back, the fire in his wounds, and the desperate need to keep moving. 37 miles had become 23, then 15, then 8. Each mile marker passed was a small victory, each step forward a defiance of the death that stalked them through the wilderness. On the morning of the 6th day, as Emma's fever finally began to break, and Rex's determination burned brighter than his pain, the smoke from Pine Ridge Fire Station's chimney became visible through the trees. They were almost home. Rex's body was failing him in ways that defied the natural order of things. His massive paws, once sure and strong enough to track suspects through any terrain, were now shredded to raw bone and sinew, leaving bloody prints in the snow that looked like crimson flowers blooming in his wake. Each step sent lightning bolts of agony up his legs, but still he walked. His ribs, once hidden beneath a magnificent coat of brown and black fur, now showed through matted hide like the bars of a prison, his body consuming itself to fuel the impossible journey. His breathing came in harsh, rattling gasps that spoke of lungs filling with fluid, of a heart pushed beyond its limits. The glass embedded in his back and flanks had worked deeper with each mile, creating a constellation of wounds that wept constantly, painting his fur with blood that froze before it could fall. Yet still he carried Emma. Still he placed one destroyed paw in front of the other, driven by a love that transcended physical limitations. "Rex, please, don't leave me too," Emma whispered against his neck, her small voice barely audible over the wind. It was the first time she had acknowledged what they both knew, that her parents were gone, that Rex was all she had left in a world that had suddenly become vast and dangerous and cold. The admission hit Rex like a physical blow. The child on his back had finally spoken the truth they'd both been avoiding, had named the grief that bound them together in this frozen wilderness. He wanted to comfort her, wanted to promise that he would never leave, but his body was writing checks his spirit couldn't cash. The last mile to Pine Ridge became a nightmare of stumbling steps and desperate recoveries. Rex fell for the first time, just as the sun began its descent behind the western peaks, his legs simply giving out beneath him. Emma tumbled into the snow, crying out in fear as her protector lay gasping in the white. But Rex's spirit burned brighter than his failing flesh. With a grunt of pure determination, he forced himself back to his feet, his amber eyes finding Emma's terrified face. "Not yet," those eyes seemed to say. "Not when we're so close." The second fall came a quarter-mile later, and this time Rex couldn't rise as quickly. His powerful frame shook with the effort, muscles cramping from exhaustion and dehydration. Emma, seeing his struggle, made a decision that spoke to the courage inherited from her journalist parents. "It's okay, Rex," she said, against his flank. Her thin arm wrapped around his neck, offering what support her tiny frame could provide to a 90-pound German shepherd who had carried her through hell. Together they shuffled forward, child and dog leaning on each other, their combined strength somehow greater than either could muster alone. The smoke from Pine Ridge Fire Station's chimney appeared through the trees like a beacon of hope, gray wisps rising into the winter sky that promised warmth, safety, and the end of their impossible journey. Rex's tail, matted with blood and debris, managed a weak wag at the sight. They had made it. Against all odds, against logic and medical possibility, they had traversed 52 miles of Rocky Mountain wilderness and survived. "Look, Rex," Emma breathed, pointing with a mittened hand toward the distant building. "People. We found people." Rex's response was a soft whine that could have been relief, exhaustion, or simple gratitude to whatever forces had carried them this far. But his eyes remained alert, still scanning for threats, still protecting the child beside him, even as his body prepared to surrender to the inevitable. Dawn was breaking over Pine Ridge when Rex and Emma finally stumbled from the forest onto the concrete pad outside Station 19. The sun pierced the cloud cover in golden shafts that painted the snow in shades of amber and rose, as if nature itself was celebrating their arrival. Inside the station, Captain Jake Morrison was making his rounds, checking equipment and preparing for another day of mountain rescues and routine calls. It was Tommy Martinez who saw them first, the young firefighter stepping outside to clear snow from the bay doors when movement at the forest's edge caught his eye. What he witnessed would be burned into his memory forever. A massive German shepherd, more ghost than dog, supporting himself on legs that shook with each step, while a small girl walked beside him with her arm around his neck. "Captain," Tommy's voice cracked with shock. "Captain, you need to see this." Jake Morrison emerged from the station, expecting to see a fender bender, or maybe a stranded motorist. Instead, he found himself face to face with a miracle, wrapped in blood and determination. The German shepherd's amber eyes met his, and in that gaze Jake saw something that would haunt his dreams and inspire his waking hours for the rest of his life. The look of a warrior who had completed an impossible mission. Rex summoned strength from some deep reserve that medical science couldn't explain. With infinite care, he guided Emma the final steps to the concrete pad, positioning her directly in front of the three firefighters, settling onto the cold concrete with surprising grace. But even as unconsciousness claimed him, his amber eyes remained fixed on Emma, watching to ensure she was receiving the help he could no longer provide. "Rex, no!" Emma cried, dropping to her knees beside him. Her small hand found the soft fur of his massive head, stroking gently as tears froze against her cheeks. "You did it, Rex. You brought me home. Please don't go to sleep now." Sarah Chen knelt beside them, her EMT training warring with the emotional impact of the scene. "Sweetheart, we need to get you to a hospital. You're hurt, and you're cold, and—" "I won't leave him," Emma said, with a firmness that brooked no argument. "Rex carried me all the way here. I won't leave him alone." Emma's fingers found the silver whistle in her pocket, pulling it out with trembling hands. She brought it to her lips and blew a weak, soft note that seemed to carry all the love and gratitude a 6-year-old heart could hold. Rex's tail, lying motionless against the concrete, gave the faintest twitch, one last acknowledgement of their unbreakable bond. As the paramedics prepared to take Emma to Pine Ridge General, she fought their gentle hands with surprising strength. "Don't let him die," she sobbed, reaching toward Rex as the veterinary team arrived. "Promise me you won't let him die." Captain Morrison knelt beside the gurney, his weathered face serious as he looked into Emma's desperate eyes. "I promise you, little one, we'll take care of your hero. That's what we do here. We take care of heroes." The promise was made with the full weight of a man who'd spent 23 years keeping similar promises to families in crisis. As Emma was loaded into the ambulance, her small hand pressed against the window, watching Rex's unconscious form being carefully transferred to the veterinary transport. Morrison knew he'd made a vow that would define the rest of his career. Pine Ridge had never seen anything like the mobilization that followed Rex and Emma's arrival. Within hours, the small mountain town transformed into a hub of medical miracles and community solidarity that would become legend in its own right. At Pine Ridge General Hospital, Dr. Amanda Foster worked over Emma's small form with the precision of a surgeon and the gentleness of a mother. The 6-year-old's condition was critical but stable. Severe dehydration that had nearly shut down her kidneys, hypothermia that had slowed her heart to dangerous levels. and an infected head wound that spoke of untreated trauma. But beneath the medical crisis, Dr. Foster found something remarkable, a will to live that seemed to burn independently of physical condition. She's Mountain View Veterinary Emergency. Dr. Jennifer Walsh presided over what she would later describe as the most challenging case of her 15-year career. Rex's vital signs painted a picture that defied survival. Massive blood loss, severe dehydration, hypothermia, and wounds that should have killed him days ago. Yet his heart kept beating with the steady rhythm of a creature that refused to surrender. "I've never seen anything like it," Dr. Walsh told her assistant as they worked to stabilize Rex's condition. "By every medical standard, he should be dead. His body has consumed muscle mass to fuel the journey. His paws are destroyed, and he's lost enough blood to fill a bathtub. But look at these readings." The heart monitor showed the strong, steady beat of a warrior's heart. Rex's breathing, while labored, maintained the rhythm of deep sleep rather than the irregular gasps of impending death. Even unconscious, sedated, and tethered to machines, he projected an aura of unshakable determination. "He's not done yet," Dr. Walsh whispered, her hand gentle on Rex's massive head. "You magnificent bastard. You're not done yet." News of the miraculous pair spread through Pine Ridge like wildfire, then jumped to regional media with the speed of modern communication. By evening, satellite trucks lined the hospital parking lots, and reporters from Denver, Colorado Springs, and beyond were crafting headlines that would capture the world's attention. "Hero dog walks 52 miles to save girl," read the Denver Post's online edition. "Miracle in the mountains. Canine and child survive impossible journey," declared the Rocky Mountain News. Within hours, the story had gone viral, shared millions of times across social media platforms by people hungry for proof that heroes still existed in a world that often seemed devoid of them. Donations poured into both hospitals, thousands of dollars from strangers moved by the story of a dog's love and a child's courage. Flowers, cards, and stuffed animals arrived by the truckload, transforming sterile medical facilities into shrines to the power of interspecies devotion. But perhaps the most significant moment came when Emma, finally stable enough for visitors, was approached by FBI agent Sarah Martinez. The agent had been tracking financial irregularities in Vincent Sterling's business empire for months, and the USB drive that Emma had clutched throughout her ordeal might hold the keys to bringing down an international criminal network. "Sweetheart," Agent Martinez said gently, "there's something in your pocket that might help us catch the bad man who hurt your family. Can you help us with that?" Emma's small hand moved to her coat pocket, where the USB drive had rested alongside her whistle throughout the entire journey. "It's safe," Emma whispered. "He kept me safe too. Now you have to keep everyone else safe." As FBI technicians began analyzing 8 months of Miguel and Sofia Rodriguez's investigation, as Rex fought for his life in the veterinary ICU, as Emma began the long process of physical and emotional healing, the small town of Pine Ridge prepared for the media storm that would make them the center of an international story about love, loss, and the unbreakable bonds that can exist between different species. The impossible journey was over, but the fight for justice was just beginning. The FBI's Digital Forensics Laboratory in Denver had processed evidence from terrorist cells, international conspiracies, and corporate espionage cases that made headlines around the world. But the USB drive carried by 6-year-old Emma Rodriguez through 52 miles of wilderness contained something that would shake veteran investigators to their core. Special Agent Sarah Martinez watched her technical team work with the methodical precision that had made them legends in law enforcement circles. Lead analyst Dr. James Chen, whose expertise in data recovery had helped solve cases from child abduction to international arms dealing, inserted the damaged drive into a specialized recovery system with hands that remained steady despite the magnitude of what they were about to uncover. "Drive's been through hell," Chen reported, his voice tight with concentration. "Water damage, temperature extremes, physical trauma. But the Rodriguez couple knew their business. They used military-grade encryption and redundant backup systems. Give me 12 hours, and I'll have everything." What emerged from that USB drive over the following day would redefine the FBI's understanding of modern human trafficking. Miguel and Sofia Rodriguez had spent 8 months documenting a network so sophisticated, so far-reaching, that it challenged everything law enforcement thought they knew about organized crime in the digital age. The videos were the hardest to watch. Hidden camera footage showed children as young as 4 describing their ordeals in languages that spanned continents: Spanish, English, Mandarin, Arabic, Romanian. Their testimonies, carefully collected by the Rodriguez couple, painted a picture of systematic abuse that used Vincent Sterling's construction empire as its infrastructure. "Look at this," Agent Martinez called to her supervisor, FBI Section Chief Robert Hayes. On her monitor, a schematic showed Sterling's construction projects across 3 states: schools, hospitals, community centers, all legitimate on the surface. But overlaid with the children's testimonies, a different pattern emerged. Underground tunnels connected buildings that shouldn't have been connected. Basement levels existed on blueprints, but not in. Chen's team had traced money flowing from Sterling's legitimate businesses through a labyrinth of offshore accounts, shell companies, and cryptocurrency transactions. The numbers were staggering. Over $40 million laundered through construction contracts, real estate deals, and charitable donations over 5 years. 23 children, Agent Martinez whispered, studying the files, ages 4 to 14, from 8 different countries. The Rodriguez couple documented each case, how they were taken, where they were held, who paid for them. She paused, her voice catching, and what happened to them after. The scope of Sterling's operation extended far beyond Colorado. Construction sites in New Mexico housed temporary holding facilities. A ranch in Arizona served as a training center where children were broken and prepared for their eventual fates. Shell companies in Mexico provided transportation across borders, while connections to European crime syndicates opened markets that paid premium prices for young victims. But perhaps most damning were the client lists, names that would rock government offices and corporate boardrooms across multiple continents. Politicians, business leaders, entertainment figures, and law enforcement officials, all documented as participants in Sterling's network. The Rodriguez couple had been meticulous, gathering not just names but photographs, financial records, and communication logs that would make prosecution inevitable. 300 miles away in his Denver penthouse, Vincent Sterling received a phone call that turned his blood to ice water. Carol Hendricks, his assistant and liaison to various unsavory operations, delivered news that shattered his carefully constructed world. "The drive survived," she said without preamble. "FBI picked up the Rodriguez girl this morning. She had it with her." Sterling's hands, manicured and soft from years of legitimate business success, began to shake. "How is that possible? The cabin was completely destroyed. We searched the remains." "The dog," Carol replied. The German shepherd got her out before the fire consumed everything. They're both alive, both being treated at Pine Ridge hospitals, and the FBI has had the drive for 6 hours. Sterling closed his eyes, his mind racing through contingencies he'd hoped never to implement. 40 years of careful planning, of building legitimate businesses to camouflage illegitimate activities, of cultivating relationships with powerful people who valued discretion above all else. All of it threatened by a 6-year-old girl and a retired police dog. "Initiate Protocol 7, he said quietly. "Full asset liquidation, client notification, facility closure. We have perhaps 12 hours before they can decode and verify the contents." "And the girl?" Sterling looked out at the Denver skyline, at the city where he'd built an empire of legitimate success and hidden horror. "The girl is a loose end that should have been tied off days ago. Find her. Finish what we started." Dr. Rachel Martinez had worked with traumatized children for 15 years, helping young minds process experiences that no child should endure. But Emma Rodriguez presented challenges that tested every technique in her considerable arsenal. The 6-year-old sat in the hospital's family therapy room, surrounded by coloring books and stuffed animals, her dark eyes holding depths that belonged to someone much older. "Can you tell me about the night at the cabin, Emma?" Dr. Martinez asked gently, her voice pitched to soothe rather than probe. Sometimes drawing helps us remember things that are hard to talk about. Emma's small fingers wrapped around a blue crayon, and she began to sketch with the focused intensity that her parents had noted in her artwork. What emerged on the paper made Dr. Martinez lean forward in amazement. A detailed drawing of Rex with magnificent golden wings spread wide, carrying a small figure through dark clouds toward a bright light. "He flew down to save me," Emma explained matter-of-factly, adding careful details to Rex's wings. "That's why he has wings in all my pictures. Guardian angels have wings, and Rex is my guardian angel." "Emma, that's beautiful. Can you tell me who was at the cabin that night? Who came to visit?" The child's crayon stopped moving, her small body tensing. "The bad man came. He made Mama and Papa go away." Dr. Martinez kept her voice carefully neutral. "Can you tell me about the bad man? What did he look like?" Instead of answering with words, Emma reached for a black crayon and began sketching a figure in the corner of her paper. Tall, imposing, with cold eyes and a cruel smile. The detail was remarkable for a 6-year-old, suggesting that the image was burned into her memory with traumatic clarity. "He hurt children before," Emma said quietly, not looking up from her drawing. "Rex knew. That's why Rex tried to stop him before, when Rex was still a police dog. But the other policeman didn't believe Rex." Dr. Martinez felt chills run down her spine. The child was describing events that predated her own involvement in Sterling's network, suggesting that Emma had absorbed information from her parents' investigation that she was now processing through play therapy. When FBI agents arrived with photo lineups later that afternoon, Emma's identification was immediate and unwavering. Among 20 photographs of middle-aged white men, her small finger pointed without hesitation to Vincent Sterling's official police portrait from his days as a deputy. "That's the bad man," she said simply. Attack on Sterling years earlier hadn't been unprovoked aggression. It had been heroic protection of a child in danger. Rex knew, Emma told Dr. Martinez as their session concluded. Dogs know things that people sometimes miss. Rex knew the bad man hurt children, So Rex tried to stop him. But nobody listened to Rex because he couldn't use words. Dr. Martinez included every detail in her report to the FBI, understanding that Emma's testimony, combined with the contents of the USB drive, would form the foundation of what might become the largest human trafficking prosecution in modern history. The task force, assembled to investigate Vincent Sterling's network, represented the largest multi-agency operation in FBI history. Section Chief Hayes coordinated with Interpol, ICE, state police departments across 6 states and international law enforcement agencies in Mexico, Canada, and 14 European countries. The evidence from Miguel and Sofia Rodriguez's investigation had provided a roadmap that led to facilities, safe houses, and criminal operations that spanned continents. "We have one shot at this," Hayes told the assembled agents during the pre-dawn briefing at FBI headquarters in Denver. "Sterling's smart, connected, and probably already implementing escape protocols. We hit everything simultaneously: his businesses, his properties, his associates, and most importantly, the locations where children are being held." At exactly 6 a.m. Mountain Time, coordinated raids began across 3 countries. Sterling's construction headquarters in Denver was surrounded by federal agents, while simultaneous operations targeted his warehouse facilities in Colorado Springs, his ranch compound in Arizona, and shipping operations along the Mexican border. The international coordination was unprecedented. In Romania, Interpol agents raided a modeling agency that served as a recruitment front. In Guatemala, local police working with ICE liberated children from a coffee plantation that existed only on paper. In Thailand, operations that had seemed unconnected to Sterling's network suddenly revealed themselves as part of a global supply chain that fed victims into his American operations. But Sterling himself proved as elusive as he was cunning. By the time agents reached his penthouse office, they found computers wiped clean, safes emptied, and a man who had vanished as thoroughly as if he'd never existed. His private jet was gone from the Denver airport, his personal accounts emptied, his carefully maintained legitimate identity abandoned like a snake shedding its skin. The manhunt that followed would become legendary in law enforcement circles. Sterling's photograph was distributed to every airport, border crossing. Critical error. Attempting to board a private flight from Denver International Airport to a non-extradition country, he was recognized by a TSA agent who had seen his face on every news broadcast for the past day. The arrest was swift, professional, and witnessed by news crews who had been monitoring the airport since his disappearance. But the real victory came with the rescue operations. 23 children, their ages and backgrounds matching the Rodriguez documentation perfectly, were liberated from facilities across 3 countries. Medical teams, social workers, and psychologists were standing by at each location, ready to begin the long process of healing that each child would require. The media response was immediate and overwhelming. Rex and Emma's story, already capturing international attention, became the centerpiece of coverage that exposed human trafficking as a modern horror hiding in plain sight. Rex was hailed as a hero whose actions had not only saved one child, but potentially hundreds more who might have fallen victim to Sterling's network. In her hospital room at Pine Ridge General, Emma watched news coverage of the arrests with the solemn attention of someone far older than her 6 years. When reporters described Rex as the dog who brought down an international crime ring, she nodded seriously. "Rex is a very good dog," she told the nurse. "He saves children. That's what guardian angels do." Federal marshals had already begun implementing witness protection protocols for Emma, understanding that Sterling's network included powerful people who would view a 6-year-old girl as an unacceptable threat to their continued freedom. New identities, relocation procedures, and long-term security arrangements would be necessary to keep Emma safe from forces that had no compunction about murdering children. But as Agent Martinez watched Emma sleep peacefully for the first time since her rescue, she understood that the little girl would never truly be alone. 3 miles away, Rex continued his own recovery, and their bond, forged in fire and sealed with blood, would endure whatever challenges lay ahead. The truth had been unveiled. Justice was beginning its slow march forward, and 2 survivors of an impossible journey were finally, truly safe. The Denver Federal Courthouse had witnessed landmark cases that shaped American jurisprudence for over a century. But nothing in its distinguished history had prepared it for the media circus that surrounded United States v. Vincent Sterling and 46 co-conspirators. Patricia Henley presided over what legal scholars would later call the most significant human trafficking prosecution in modern history. The evidence tables groaned under the weight of documents, hard drives, and physical evidence collected during raids across 3 countries. The defendants' table, normally occupied by a single accused criminal and their attorney, now accommodated a small army of high-powered defense lawyers, whose combined hourly rates could fund a small country's legal system. Vincent Sterling sat at the center of this legal machinery, his appearance carefully crafted to project innocence and respectability. His silver hair was perfectly styled, his expensive suit tailored to suggest success rather than criminality, his expression one of wounded dignity rather than guilt. The transformation from the monster who had ordered the murder of a family to the pillar of the community was so complete that even seasoned court observers found it difficult to reconcile the 2 images. His lead attorney, Margaret Whitfield, commanded fees that exceeded most people's annual salaries, and had built her reputation on making the impossible seem plausible. Her opening statement was a masterpiece of misdirection and character assassination that painted Miguel and Sofia Rodriguez as obsessed conspiracy theorists who had fabricated evidence to further their careers. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Whitfield said, her voice carrying the authority of decades in federal courtrooms, "what we have here is not a case of international crime, but rather a case of international deception. The so-called evidence against Mr. Sterling was created by 2 individuals whose careers depended on finding stories where none existed. But the prosecution's case, led by U.S. Attorney David Chen, rested on something more powerful than fabricated documents or conspiracy theories. It rested on the testimony of children who had lived through horrors that no imagination could have created. When Emma Rodriguez was called to testify, a hush fell over the packed courtroom that seemed to hold its collective breath. At 7 years old now, she appeared impossibly small as she walked toward the witness stand, clutching a folded piece of paper that would become central to her testimony. Judge Henley had made special accommodations for the child witness, a smaller chair, frequent breaks, and most importantly, the presence of a therapy dog to provide emotional support during what would undoubtedly be the most difficult moments of her young life. But it wasn't the designated therapy dog that captured the courtroom's attention. In a wheelchair near the prosecution table sat Rex, still recovering from his ordeal, but alert and watchful. His amber eyes tracked Emma's movement toward the witness stand, and when she looked in his direction, his usually characterized courtroom proceedings, "Can you tell us about the night at the cabin? Take your time." Emma's small voice carried clearly through the silent courtroom, her words simple but devastating in their clarity. "The bad man came to our house and made Mama and Papa go away. But Rex saved me. He carried me through the snow and the cold and the scary places, and he never let the bad man hurt me." When she unfolded her drawing, the same picture of Rex with golden wings that she'd shown Dr. Martinez months earlier, and held it up for the jury to see, several jurors visibly wiped tears from their eyes. The image of a child's interpretation of heroism, rendered in crayon and innocent faith, spoke more powerfully than any legal argument about the bond between the girl and the dog who had risked everything to save her. Defense attorney Whitfield's cross-examination was gentle but persistent, attempting to plant seeds of doubt about Emma's memories and the reliability of a child's testimony. But when she suggested that Emma might have confused what she saw that night, the little girl's response silenced the courtroom. "Rex didn't let the bad man hurt me," Emma said with the absolute certainty that only children possess. "Rex is a good dog. He saves children from bad people. That's what good dogs do." The trial lasted 6 weeks, with testimony from the rescued children, FBI agents, international law enforcement officials, and financial experts who traced the network's money flows across continents. Sterling's co-conspirators, faced with overwhelming evidence and the prospect of life sentences, began cooperating with prosecutors in exchange for reduced sentences. When the jury returned after 18 hours of deliberation, their verdict was swift and unanimous: guilty on all counts. Human trafficking, conspiracy, racketeering, money laundering, and murder. As the foreman read each verdict, visible tears could be seen in the gallery where victims' families sat. Sterling himself showed no emotion, but his hands trembled slightly as the weight of his crimes was officially acknowledged. Judge Henley's sentencing 2 weeks later reflected the magnitude of Sterling's crimes. Life without the possibility of parole, plus 300 years for the trafficking charges. The sentence ensured that Sterling would die in federal prison, never again able to harm a child. The dismantling of Sterling's network sent shockwaves through criminal organizations worldwide, but nowhere was the impact more profound than in the lives of the victims who had been liberated from his facilities. 23 children from 8 countries began the long journey toward healing, supported by international cooperation. Between social services, mental health professionals, and law enforcement agencies that had worked together to bring down the network. Sterling's 46 organization that had operated with impunity for over a decade. Seized assets totaling over $200 million were directed toward victim services, law enforcement training, and international efforts to combat human trafficking. But perhaps the most significant consequence was the recognition accorded to the unlikely hero whose courage had made it all possible. In a ceremony at the White House, Rex became the first dog in American history to receive the Congressional Medal of Honor for Civilian Animals. The citation read simply, "For extraordinary heroism in saving the life of Emma Rodriguez and providing evidence that led to the liberation of 23 children from human trafficking operations." Rex, still recovering but dignified in a custom-made harness that accommodated his injuries, sat perfectly still as the President of the United States placed the medal around his neck.
The ceremony was broadcast internationally, cementing Rex's status as a symbol of loyalty, courage, and the unbreakable bonds that can exist between different species.
The personal consequences were equally profound. Sheriff Maria Santos and her husband, veterinarian Dr. James Santos, formally adopted Emma Rodriguez, providing her with the stable, loving home that every child deserves. The adoption process had been expedited, given Emma's unique circumstances, and by her 8th birthday, she was legally Emma Santos, with new identity documents that would help protect her from any remaining elements of Sterling's network. Emma's integration into the Santos family and the Pine Ridge community was remarkably smooth. She enrolled in Pine Ridge Elementary School, where her classmates knew her story, but treated her with the casual acceptance that children show toward anything they consider normal. She joined the school's art club, made friends with children who shared her love of drawing, and began to build the kind of ordinary childhood that her parents had wanted for her. The community's response was overwhelming. Donations poured in to establish the Rodriguez Memorial Scholarship Fund, providing educational opportunities for other children who had survived trafficking. Local businesses competed to sponsor events supporting anti-trafficking organizations, and Pine Ridge became an unlikely center for international awareness about modern slavery. Rex received a hero's welcome everywhere he went, but his favorite moments were the quiet ones spent with Emma, rebuilding the bond that had been forged in fire and wilderness. The healing process for both Emma and Rex was neither linear nor simple, requiring patience, expertise, and the kind of love that doesn't flinch from difficult truths. Dr. Rachel Martinez continued working with Emma through weekly therapy sessions that combined traditional counseling with art therapy, play therapy, and specialized techniques for treating childhood trauma. Emma's drawings became a roadmap to her recovery. Initially filled with dark elements as images of fire and fear, they gradually began to include brighter colors, hopeful themes, and pictures of her new life with the Santos family. The angels remained constant in her artwork, Rex with his golden wings, her parents watching over her from heaven, and new angels representing the people who had helped her heal. Rex's physical rehabilitation was overseen by Dr. James Santos, whose veterinary expertise was supplemented by specialists from Colorado State University's veterinary program. The damage to Rex's paws required multiple surgeries and would leave him with a permanent limp, while arthritis settled into joints that had been pushed beyond their limits during the mountain crossing. But his spirit remained unbroken, his protective instincts toward Emma as strong as ever. Both Emma and Rex showed symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder that required ongoing attention. Emma experienced nightmares, hypervigilance around strangers, and episodes of anxiety that could be triggered by unexpected sounds or smells. Rex displayed similar symptoms, startling at loud noises, positioning himself between Emma and perceived threats, and occasional episodes where he would pace restlessly, as if reliving their journey through the wilderness. Their healing became intertwined in ways that amazed the professionals working with them. Emma's presence calmed Rex during his anxious episodes, while Rex's steady companionship provided Emma with a sense of security that no human could replicate. They had saved each other once in the mountains, and they continued saving each other daily in the quieter battles against trauma and memory. The breakthrough moment came on a sunny afternoon in the Santos backyard. Emma was eating a sandwich, while Rex lay nearby. Both of them relaxed in a way that had taken months to achieve. When Emma turned to put her sandwich down, Rex quickly snatched it, with the lightning reflexes that had once made him a legendary police dog. Emma's reaction was immediate and wonderful. She burst into laughter, her first genuine, unguarded laugh since the night of the fire. "Rex," she giggled, chasing the German shepherd around the yard as he pranced with his stolen sandwich. "That's my lunch." Maria Santos, watching from the kitchen window, felt tears of joy streaming down her face. The sound of a child's laughter, pure and untroubled, seemed to fill not just the yard, but the entire town with hope. That night, for the first time since joining the Santos family, Rex slept peacefully through the night, without the restless pacing that had marked his recovery. Emma, too, slept soundly, her small hand resting on Rex's massive head, as they both found the peace that had eluded them for so long. The journey from victims to survivors to heroes was far from complete, but they were walking it together, one day at a time, one small victory at a time, proving that love truly could conquer even the darkest evil. Witness something that would shape the rest of her life. She sat in the waiting room of Pine Ridge General Hospital, where she and Rex made regular visits to comfort other patients, watching as a golden retriever named Buddy worked with a 9-year-old boy who hadn't spoken since being rescued from a trafficking ring in Phoenix. The child, Marcus, had been withdrawn and unresponsive to traditional therapy for months. But something about Buddy's gentle presence began to crack the shell of trauma that surrounded him. "He's not scary like the bad people," Marcus whispered to Buddy, his first words in 6 months. "Dogs don't hurt kids." Emma watched with fascination as Marcus gradually opened up to the therapy dog, sharing memories and fears that he couldn't voice to human therapists. The breakthrough was remarkable, but what struck Emma most profoundly was the realization that what Rex had done for her, providing safety, comfort, and unconditional love during the darkest moments of her life, could be replicated to help other children who had endured similar trauma. That evening, Emma approached Maria and James Santos with an idea that seemed impossibly ambitious for a 10-year-old girl. "We should teach more dogs to be like Rex," she announced at dinner, her dark eyes bright with excitement. "There are lots of kids like me who need guardian angels with 4 legs." The concept that emerged from Emma's inspiration would become Rex's Guardian Angels, a foundation established with donations that poured in from around the world. The international response to Rex and Emma's story had generated not just media attention, but genuine desire to transform their miracle into systematic help for other trafficking survivors. Major donors included technology companies, entertainment figures, and individuals who had been moved by the tale of a dog's love and a child's courage. The Foundation's mission statement, written with input from Emma herself, was elegantly simple: to train rescue dogs as specialized therapy animals for children who have survived human trafficking, providing the same unconditional love and protection that Rex provided to Emma and helping young survivors rebuild their trust in the world. The irony was perfect and poetic. Vincent Sterling's seized mansion in the Colorado foothills became the Foundation's first training facility. The same property where Sterling had planned the destruction of families was transformed into a center where dogs and children learned to heal together. Sterling's office became a library of animal behavior and child psychology texts. His private gymnasium was converted into training areas where dogs learned specialized skills for working with traumatized children. The swimming pool, where Sterling had entertained co-conspirators, became a therapy space where children could interact with dogs in a relaxed, non-threatening environment. Emma's role as youth ambassador was unprecedented. At 10 years old, she helped design programs based on her own experiences, consulted with child psychologists about what approaches would be most effective, and participated in the selection process for dogs that would enter the training program. Her insights were invaluable. She understood instinctively what adult professionals had to learn through research and observation. "The dogs need to be patient," Emma explained to the training staff during one of her visits to the facility. "Sometimes kids like me get scared and angry, and we might hit or yell. But the dogs can't get scared or angry back. They have to be like Rex, always calm, always protecting, always loving." Rex himself despite being 11 years old and showing signs of age, became the model and mentor for younger dogs entering the program. His natural protective instincts, honed through years of police work and refined through his bond with Emma, provided a template for training other animals. Younger dogs would shadow Rex during training sessions, learning through observation how to position themselves protectively near children, how to remain calm during emotional outbursts, and how to provide comfort through physical presence. Watching Rex work with both the trainee dogs and visiting children was like witnessing a masterclass in empathy. His amber eyes seemed to assess each child's needs individually, adjusting his approach accordingly. With withdrawn children, he would lie quietly nearby, making his presence known without demanding interaction. With angry children, he would absorb their fury without flinching, becoming an immovable source of patience. With frightened children, he would position himself between them and their fears, his massive frame a living shield against the world's dangers. The training facility buzzed with purposeful activity as dogs progressed through increasingly sophisticated curricula designed specifically for anti-trafficking work. Unlike traditional therapy dogs, these animals learned to recognize signs of dissociation, hypervigilance, and trauma responses. They were trained to interrupt nightmares, provide deep pressure therapy during panic attacks, and create safe spaces around their assigned children in crowded or chaotic environments. The international response to Rex's guardian angels exceeded every expectation. Within 18 months of the Foundation's establishment, requests for program implementation arrived from 15 countries across 4 continents. Law enforcement agencies, social services departments, and non-governmental organizations had witnessed the transformative effect that properly trained dogs could have on trafficking survivors and wanted to replicate the success in their own regions. Building these international partnerships required navigation of complex cultural, legal, and logistical challenges. Emma, now 11 and remarkably poised for her age, found herself participating in video conferences with Interpol officials, UNICEF representatives, and local law enforcement leaders who were amazed to be taking direction from a child who had lived through the experiences they were trying to address. In Guatemala, the children are afraid of authority figures because corrupt police were involved in their trafficking, explained Colonel Maria Herrera during one such conference. But they respond to animals with immediate trust. Your program could be the key to unlocking their testimony and beginning their healing. The Foundation developed specialized training protocols that could be adapted to different cultural contexts while maintaining core principles of trauma-informed care. Dogs in Mexico learned to work with children who spoke multiple indigenous languages. Animals in the Philippines were trained to function in tropical climates and crowded urban environments. European programs integrated with established social services systems that had different approaches to child welfare. The success stories began arriving within months of the first international deployments. In Guatemala, a German shepherd named Diego helped a 12-year-old girl named Carmen testify against her traffickers, providing the emotional support she needed to face her abusers in court. In the Philippines, a golden retriever named Luna worked with a group of boys who had been forced into labor trafficking, helping them process their trauma through play therapy enhanced by canine companionship. In Romania, a Belgian Malinois named Victor assisted with the rehabilitation of children who had been trafficked for organ harvesting, his protective presence helping them feel safe in medical environments that had previously been sources of terror. Emma's growth during this period was remarkable to witness. The shy, traumatized 6-year-old who had arrived at Pine Ridge clinging to Rex's neck, had evolved into a confident, articulate advocate for trafficking survivors worldwide. At 12, she was delivering keynote speeches at international conferences, consulting with government officials on policy changes, and serving as the face of a movement that was transforming how the world approached the rehabilitation of trafficked children. Her presentations combined the emotional power of personal experience with sophisticated understanding of trauma psychology and animal behavior. When I was lost in the mountains, she would tell audiences of law enforcement officials and social workers, Rex didn't try to fix me with words. He just stayed with me, protected me, and loved me until I was strong enough to heal myself. That's what these dogs do for other children. They provide the safety and love that makes healing possible. National Geographic's documentary crew followed Emma and Rex for 8 months, capturing not only their story, but the broader impact of the foundation they had inspired. The resulting film, Guardian Angel,
Attention to both human trafficking as a global crisis and animal-assisted therapy as a powerful intervention. By the time Rex reached his 11th birthday, the signs of age were becoming impossible to ignore. The magnificent German shepherd who had once carried a child through 52 miles of wilderness now moved with the careful deliberation of advancing years. Arthritis had settled into the joints that had been damaged during their mountain crossing, creating a permanent limp that spoke of sacrifices made for love. His once lustrous coat had become grizzled with white, particularly around his muzzle, giving him the distinguished appearance of a canine elder statesman. Emma, now 12, and acutely aware of canine lifespans, had begun preparing herself for the inevitable, while simultaneously treasuring every moment they had together. She spent hours researching dog health, consulting with veterinary specialists, and learning about the aging process in large breed dogs. Her approach was characteristically practical. She wanted to understand what Rex was experiencing so she could make his remaining time as comfortable as possible. One of her most touching gestures was the blue sweater she spent months knitting for Rex. She had remembered, with the precision that trauma sometimes brings to memory, that blue had been Rex's favorite color during their time at the cabin. She'd noticed how he would always choose the blue toys from a selection, would rest most comfortably on blue blankets, would seem most relaxed when she wore blue clothing. The sweater, crafted with 12-year-old hands but infinite love, was perfectly sized for Rex's large frame and designed to provide warmth for joints that now ached with changes in weather. "It's your favorite color," Emma explained as she first fitted the sweater on Rex, who submitted to the process with the patient dignity that characterized his approach to everything Emma related. "And it matches your eyes when the light hits them just right." Their evening routine had evolved to accommodate Rex's changing needs. Where once he had been an active, energetic presence in the Santos household, he now preferred quiet companionship. Emma would curl up beside him on his orthopedic bed, reading aloud from books while Rex dozed peacefully. The silver whistle from her 6th birthday always rested nearby, a tangible connection to their shared history and the miracle of their survival. Dr. James Santos monitored Rex's health with the careful attention of both a veterinarian and a father figure. Regular checkups revealed the expected progression of age-related conditions, some kidney function decline, early signs of heart murmur, and the arthritis. Emma to school visits and foundation events
though these appearances became less frequent and shorter in duration. His presence still had the same transformative effect on traumatized children. There was something about his calm dignity, his obvious love for Emma, and his gentle patience that spoke to young hearts that had been broken by human cruelty. Children who wouldn't speak to therapists would whisper secrets to Rex. Kids who flinched from adult touch would bury their faces in his fur. "He's getting old," Emma acknowledged during one of their therapy sessions with Dr. Martinez. "I know he won't live forever. I know I need to be ready." But being ready for loss, Emma was learning, was different from accepting it. Every gray hair on Rex's muzzle, every slow moment when he rose from his bed, every afternoon when he chose rest over play, served as reminders that their time together was precious and finite. She began creating what she called memory projects, photo albums chronicling their life together, written accounts of their adventures, and recordings of Rex's various sounds, so she would never forget the way he communicated with gentle whines, contented sighs, and the particular bark he reserved for welcoming her home from school. Rex, with the intuitive understanding that had made him such an exceptional police dog and therapeutic companion, seemed to recognize Emma's need to prepare for their eventual separation. He submitted patiently to extra brushing sessions that were really excuses for Emma to spend more time touching his fur. He tolerated the constant photography that documented their daily routines. He allowed Emma to measure his paws, trace his profile, and create detailed drawings that would preserve his image long after he was gone. But perhaps most importantly, Rex continued to live fully in each moment, showing Emma through example how to find joy in simple pleasures. A sunny spot for napping, the arrival of dinner, the sound of Emma's voice calling his name. He was teaching her, in his quiet way, that love doesn't diminish with the passage of time, and that the bond they shared would transcend whatever physical limitations the future might bring. The legacy they were building together, the foundation, the rescued children, the trained dogs serving around the world, was already larger than either of their individual lives. But for Emma, no legacy would ever be as important as the lessons Rex taught her daily about loyalty, courage, and unconditional love. The morning of Rex's final school visit dawned crisp and clear, with Colorado sunshine streaming through Pine Ridge elementary windows, laying golden rectangles across polished floors. Emma, now 12 and poised beyond her years, stood in the main hallway, adjusting Rex's blue sweater one last time. It had become his signature, as iconic to the children here as a superhero's cape. Rex moved slowly, spoke of aching joints. At 11, he was ancient for a German shepherd, but the same protective fire that had carried Emma through the wilderness 6 years earlier still burned in his amber eyes. None of the 200 children in the gymnasium knew this would be his last appearance as ambassador for Rex's Guardian Angels Foundation. Principal Sarah Henderson had arranged the assembly with reverence reserved for visiting dignitaries. Handmade banners lined the walls. "Thank you, Rex," and "Our hero." The children sat cross-legged in perfect silence, their faces glowing with awe. Emma took the microphone, her voice steady but weighted. "6 years ago, Rex saved my life through mountains, snow, and darkness. But that was just the beginning of how he saved me." She told the story they'd all heard but never tired of, the night of fire, the impossible journey, the fire station rescue that had made their town famous. But now she spoke with the perspective of someone who understood what heroism truly meant. "Rex taught me heroes don't always wear capes," she said, resting her hand on his grizzled head. Sometimes they have 4 legs, and even when they're tired, hurt, and scared, they keep going, because love makes them strong. When she finished, something remarkable happened. Without a word, the children rose and formed a line. One by one, they knelt beside Rex, offering pets, whispered thanks, or simply their quiet presence. Rex, summoning strength beyond explanation, greeted each child. His tail, white with age, wagged slowly. His clouded eyes studied each young face, as if committing them to memory. 7-year-old Marcus Thompson, once helped by therapy dog Buddy, approached with special reverence. "Thank you for showing me dogs are good," he whispered, hugging Rex's neck. "You helped me not be scared anymore." A photographer captured the moment. Rex, surrounded by children, sunlight streaming in like a blessing. In the final shot, Emma knelt beside him, both encircled by the young lives he'd touched. By the time they reached the Santos family car, Rex's breathing was heavy, his sides heaving from the effort. Yet there was contentment in his eyes. He had completed his mission. The drive home was quiet, Rex's head resting on Emma's lap as she stroked his fur. "You did so good today," she murmured. "They'll remember you forever." That evening, Emma gave Rex her final gift, a hand-knitted blue blanket, crafted in secret for weeks, woven with strands of his own fur collected during grooming. She helped him settle onto it in his corner of the living room, the soft wool easing his aching joint. 6 years ago. "Now I'll bring you home too, to where good dogs go when their work is done." His eyes opened, locking on hers. She could feel he understood in the way dogs do, that this was goodbye. "I know you're tired," she continued, stroking behind his ears. "It's okay to rest. You've done so much good." He shifted, laying his head more fully in her lap. Tears filled her eyes at the familiar gesture. She dozed beside him, waking every few hours to find him still watching her, his gaze heavy with love and gratitude. By morning, he could no longer stand. The legs that had carried him through 8 years of police work and 52 miles of rescue had given out. Dr. James Santos examined him gently. "It's time," he said softly. "He's not in pain, but his body's ready to rest." Emma nodded, steeling herself for the hardest goodbye. That afternoon, their living room filled with the family Rex had made in Pine Ridge. Maria and James sat nearby, faces etched with parental grief. Captain Jake Morrison, Lieutenant Sarah Chen, and firefighter Tommy Martinez, once the rookie saved by Rex, came to pay respects. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, who had fought to save him at the fire station, was there. Even Principal Henderson and several teachers arrived, along with Sheriff Maria Santos, holding his old K-9 badge to be buried with him. Dr. Santos prepared the injection, his voice gentle. "He won't feel pain. He'll just get very sleepy." Rex seemed to know. With effort, he lifted his paw and placed it on Emma's hand, just as he had the first day they met. Through tears, Emma spoke clearly. "Thank you for not giving up when I wanted to give up. Thank you for showing me love is stronger than fear. Thank you for being my guardian angel." His amber eyes stayed fixed on her as the injection took hold. His breathing slowed. Muscles long strained relaxed. The years of weariness melted into peace. His eyes closed for the last time, and the room fell silent except for Emma's whispered words of love. By evening, news of his passing spread across Pine Ridge. Flowers, cards, and stuffed animals appeared at the fire station where his statue stood. Children who had met him that morning left drawings of Rex with golden wings. Adults shared stories of how his courage had inspired them to face their own trials. Rex had come full circle, from hero in the wilderness to teacher in the classroom, and finally to a symbol of love that would live on in the hearts of all who knew his story. The entire town mourned the loss of their four-legged hero, understanding that something irreplaceable had left the world. But in their grief, they also celebrated a life that had proven beyond, had saved, the children he had comforted, and the foundation that bore his name and continued his work around the world. Governor Patricia Williams had presided over state funerals for war heroes, civil rights leaders, and public servants who had shaped Colorado's history. But never had she declared an official day of mourning for a dog. The proclamation, signed with ceremonial gravity in the state capitol, recognized Rex as a hero whose courage transcended species and whose legacy will inspire generations of Coloradans to believe in the power of unconditional love and sacrifice. The memorial service drew attendees from across the globe, transforming Pine Ridge into an international pilgrimage site for those whose lives had been touched by Rex and Emma's story. The most moving sight was the procession of K-9 units that arrived from every corner of the nation. German Shepherds, Belgian Malinois, Golden Retrievers, and Labrador Retrievers, all wearing ceremonial black bands around their working vests, their handlers standing at attention as they formed an honor guard that stretched for 3 city blocks. Captain Jake Morrison, now fire chief of Pine Ridge, had overseen the construction of the memorial with the same meticulous attention he'd once devoted to emergency responses. The bronze statue, crafted by renowned sculptor Maria Castellanos, captured the moment of Rex's arrival at the fire station with heartbreaking accuracy. The life-size German Shepherd was depicted mid-stride, his powerful frame showing both exhaustion and determination, while on his back rested the small figure of Emma, her arms wrapped trustingly around his neck. The inscription, chosen by Emma herself, was carved into the granite base, in letters that caught the Colorado sunlight. He walked so others could live. Below it, in smaller script, were the dates of Rex's birth and death, along with a simple phrase that had become the motto of the foundation bearing his name. Love always finds a way. Emma Santos, now 13 and possessing the poise of someone who had grown up in the public eye while never losing her essential humanity, approached the podium with the silver whistle glinting at her throat. She had insisted on wearing Rex's favorite blue color, and her dress matched the blue sweater that had provided him comfort in his final months. Rex taught me that heroes don't choose their moments, Emma began, her voice carrying clearly through the crowd of thousands who had gathered in Pine Ridge's main square. Moments choose heroes. 6 years ago, in a burning cabin, Rex chose to be my hero. Today, we choose to remember him not just as a dog who saved one little girl, but as a symbol of what's possible, generation of therapy dogs, and his impact on international efforts to combat human trafficking. Rex's legacy isn't just in the children he saved directly, Emma continued, but in every therapy dog that now works with trafficking survivors, in every law that protects retired service animals, in every person who sees this statue and remembers that love is stronger than evil. The time capsule ceremony that followed was perhaps the most emotional moment of the day. Emma carefully placed 3 items into the sealed container that would be buried beside the statue. Her original drawing of Rex with golden wings, the blue sweater she had knitted for his final winter, and the silver whistle that had been her 6th birthday present from him. Each item represented a different aspect of their bond: innocence, devotion, and unbreakable connection. "These belong with Rex," Emma explained to the hushed crowd. "Someday, when people find this capsule, they'll understand that the most important things in life can't be measured or weighed. They can only be felt." Pine Ridge Mayor Robert Chen announced the community's permanent commitment to honoring Rex's memory through an annual memorial walk that would raise funds for therapy dog programs while educating participants about human trafficking awareness. The first Rex Memorial Walk, scheduled for the anniversary of his death, already had 5,000 registered participants from around the world. As the ceremony concluded and the Honor Guard K9 units performed a final salute, their handlers commanding them to sit in perfect synchronization, many attendees remarked that they could feel Rex's presence in the mountain air, as if his spirit had chosen to remain in the town where his story had begun. 7 years after Rex's death, the foundation bearing his name had evolved into one of the world's most successful anti-trafficking organizations, with Rex's Guardian Angels programs operating in 47 countries across 6 continents. The statistics spoke to an impact that exceeded even Emma's most ambitious childhood dreams. 2,847 rescued children had been paired with specially trained therapy dogs, and follow-up studies showed remarkable improvement in their recovery rates compared to traditional therapy approaches. The program's success had attracted attention from major international organizations. UNICEF had adopted Rex's Guardian Angels protocols as a recommended practice for child trafficking survivors. Interpol included therapy dog training in their standard curriculum for agents working trafficking cases. The European Union had funded expansion programs in 12 member nations, while similar initiatives were underway in Australia, New Zealand, and parts of Asia. Legislative changes inspired by Rex's story had transformed animal welfare laws across the United States. Rex's Law, passed in 23 states, provided comprehensive protection. Who had served in police, military, and emergency response roles received guaranteed veterinary care, comfortable retirement, and legal protections against abuse or abandonment. Educational curricula based on Emma and Rex's story were now taught in schools worldwide as examples of resilience, courage, and the power of interspecies bonds. Children from elementary through high school levels studied their journey as part of character education programs, anti-bullying initiatives, and lessons about overcoming adversity. The National Geographic documentary Guardian Angels, the Rex and Emma story, had won 3 Emmy Awards and reached an estimated 50 million viewers globally. The film's success led to a children's book series, an animated special that aired annually during National Pet Week, and plans for a feature film that would introduce their story to new generations. Emma herself had evolved from traumatized child to international advocate, graduating as valedictorian from Pine Ridge High School, before earning a full scholarship to study psychology at Colorado State University. At 21, she completed her master's degree in trauma psychology, with a specialization in animal-assisted therapy, writing her thesis on interspecies bonds in post-traumatic recovery, the Rex Protocol. Her research had been groundbreaking, providing scientific validation for what she had experienced intuitively as a child. Brain scans of trafficking survivors showed that interaction with trained therapy dogs produced measurable changes in areas associated with trust, emotional regulation, and stress response. The Rex Protocol became standard treatment in child trauma centers worldwide. Major universities competed to offer Emma doctoral programs, recognizing that her unique combination of lived experience and academic rigor made her an invaluable researcher and advocate. She chose to remain at Colorado State, where she could continue working with the Rex's Guardian Angels training facility while pursuing her PhD in developmental psychology. Her doctoral dissertation, Love as Medicine, quantifying the therapeutic impact of human-animal bonds in childhood trauma recovery, was published by Harvard University Press and became required reading in psychology programs nationwide. At 24, Dr. Emma Santos was already considered one of the leading experts in trauma recovery and animal-assisted therapy. The 18th anniversary of Rex's memorial service dawned with the same crisp Colorado clarity that had marked so many significant moments in Emma's life. She returned to Pine Ridge as Dr. Emma Santos, Director of Canine-Assisted Trauma Recovery at Colorado State University and recipient of the International Children's Rights Award for her work with trafficking survivors. The town had changed dramatically since her childhood. What was once a small mountain community had become a destination for researchers, advocates, and tourists drawn by Rex's legacy. The Rex's Guardian Angels Training Center occupied the entire former Sterling property, now expanded to include dormitories for visiting researchers, conference facilities, and state-of-the-art kennels that housed nearly 100 dogs in various stages of training. Emma walked through the facility with the easy confidence of someone who had helped design every aspect of its operation. In Training Room A, she watched 12 golden retrievers learning to recognize dissociative episodes in child trauma victims. Room B housed German Shepherds practicing protective positioning techniques that Rex had pioneered. The advanced training facility showcased therapy dogs learning to work with children who spoke languages ranging from Mandarin to Arabic to Quechua. "These dogs are carrying on Rex's work," Emma explained to a group of visiting psychology students from the University of Denver. "Every technique we teach them, every behavior we reinforce, comes from studying how Rex interacted with traumatized children. He's still teaching us, even after all these years." Her fingers unconsciously found the silver whistle that still hung around her neck, now accompanied by her university ID badge, and a small paw print pendant that had been Rex's first Christmas gift to her. The whistle had become her signature accessory, recognized by colleagues worldwide as a symbol of unbreakable bonds and enduring love. The anniversary ceremony drew the largest crowd in Pine Ridge's history, over 10,000 attendees, including trafficking survivors, therapy dog handlers, law enforcement officials, and families who had been touched by the Rex's Guardian Angels program. Emma's keynote address focused on the future of their work and the challenges that lay ahead. "Rex saved me from a burning cabin 18 years ago," she told the assembled crowd. "But his real legacy is in the thousands of children who have been saved since then by dogs trained in his methods. His spirit lives on in every therapy dog that comforts a frightened child, in every moment when love conquers fear." As the formal ceremony concluded, Emma made her way to Rex's statue, now surrounded by a memorial garden where children and adults had left flowers, drawings, and handwritten notes of gratitude. She stood alone before the bronze figure, the noise of the crowd fading as she entered the private space of memory and connection. Bringing the silver whistle to her lips, Emma blew a soft, clear note that seemed to hang in the mountain air like a prayer. Still leading us home, Rex. She remained by the statue as afternoon shadows lengthened across Pine Ridge, her hand resting on the bronze paw that seemed to reach toward her across the years. Around her the work continued, children healing, dogs training, advocates planning the next phase of their global mission. Some angels have wings, Emma reflected, watching a young therapy dog named Angel, a German shepherd who looked remarkably like Rex, comfort a recently rescued 8-year-old girl from Thailand. Others have 4 paws and hearts bigger than the sky. Rex was gone, but his spirit lived on in every child who learned to trust again, in every dog who chose protection over self-preservation, in every moment when love proved stronger than the darkness that humans could create. The eternal guardian watched over them all, his legacy written not in bronze and stone, but in the endless ripples of compassion that spread from one small mountain town to transform the world. His walk was finished, but the journey of love he had begun would continue forever. Rex and Emma's story reminds us that the bond between humans and animals transcends words, circumstances, and even impossible odds. German shepherds, like Rex, embody a loyalty so pure it defies explanation. They don't love us because we're perfect, but because loving deeply is simply who they are. Every day, in quiet moments across America, dogs are performing their own small miracles. They're comforting children after nightmares, sensing when their humans need extra affection, and choosing devotion over convenience in ways that humble us. These connections don't just enrich our lives, they transform them, teaching us about unconditional love, resilience, and what it means to never give up on someone you care about. Your own dog has stories to tell, wisdom to share, and a bond with you that's every bit as sacred as Rex and Emma's. If you've ever wondered how to deepen that connection, how to truly understand what your furry companion is trying to tell you, there are gentle ways to strengthen that beautiful relationship you already share. Sometimes the most meaningful journeys begin with simply listening to the heart that beats beside yours.